How exciting. I feel like I'm on Rachel Ray's cooking show.
Welcome to Cooking and Consent. Things you don't think that go together, but definitely do, because if you don't listen to what people want, there's consequences. So let's get started. We're gonna make some Mexican street tacos today. My friend is Salvadorian, and he taught me how to make his. What you'll need is cilantro, onion, steak cut very thin, which I already pre-cut my steak. I'll come up and show you guys. It's like the size of my fingernail. It's like about this big, you know, nothing too crazy. I've already warmed up my pan, so I'm gonna go ahead and toss it in there. So, right, I want to try and do this equal parts cooking and equal parts consent. So when we hear the word consent, words that typically come to mind is like yes, right? Right away when I hear that word, I just am always like, oh, okay, so consent means yes, and that's not always the case. The consent I'm talking about here is something that's constant, something that is a never-ending conversation, and consent is something that can also be withdrawn as well at any point in time during your conversations. So that doesn't always specifically mean sex. It's why we're doing a cooking and consent show, so that I can hopefully inspire you guys to have these conversations with your kids. Mary, Ellery, when I say consent, like what are words that typically come to your mind, I guess?
Yes was definitely one of the first words that came to my mind.
Right now I'm chopping cilantro. We're waiting.
And I think, like, legally is how I usually think of the word consent, because unfortunately that's usually the place that it comes up is, was there consent once there's a problem, like once we're in the legal setting, right? And in the legal setting, consent pretty much only means yes. We're only interested in whether or not both parties were saying yes.
I think that my idea has grown, and now if anything without it, I guess I also interpreted it as yes, but anything without it is rape. So I think the absence of consent is darkness, is negativity, is everything. With anything without it is not okay.
So I agree, and I think that kind of segues perfectly into like my next point of like with consent is like understanding what to do after you're not given consent, right? Everybody all the time is like, sorry, I'm collecting my thoughts here.
That's okay.
But everybody all the time is pushing that you need enthusiastic consent, which is super duper awesome. And I agree 110%. But the thing is when that consent isn't given, bad things sometimes can happen because we don't know how to accept rejection. I know for a fact I was never taught how to accept rejection gracefully, if that makes any kind of sense at all. We're going to take a quick break from the consent topic and talk about the cooking again. So we also need some corn tortillas, and I heat up my second skillet. I'm going to wait for that to start, and then what you'll do is you'll put them on there, right? And so would either of you like to learn how to flip tortillas today?
Yes.
Yes? See, I just got consent for that. Would you like your meat cooked all the way through?
Yes.
If I were to cook the meat all the way through, what could happen?
Oh, I'm already having stomach problems today. My day would be miserable.
If I didn't cook the meat all the way through, you know, there's consequences that are so much more than the surface level of not respecting other people's. Those consequences can cause later on in her day or a day, those issues can stem way farther than people care to think about, and I encourage you guys to think about ways to accept rejection gracefully throughout these next few minutes, and then we'll kind of come back to that. But I turned that on. Now I'm going to talk about what I'll use to season my meat with. I don't have limes because I'm dumb, but I have Worcestershire sauce, minced onion, some garlic powder, and then salt and pepper. And then when my meat's about like all the way cooked through, I'll add all of those seasonings. Right now it's looking pretty good. And then at the end, I'll turn my meat up all the way so that I can get a nice crunch on the outside of it.
Noting that, noting the crotch.
I'll turn up my meat just a little bit so I can kind of cook. I'm gonna add some oil to this pan so we can start some tortillas.
All right. It's unfortunate that everybody watching right now can't smell how good this smells.
It does smell delicious.
Alrighty, so now I have an onion. I'm gonna start chopping up and everything. Alright, so I know nobody's like the biggest fan of statistics, but these are reasons why I feel so impassioned and so heartfelt about consent, because unfortunately, kids aged 11 to 18 have reported that over half of their relationships they've experienced some kind of partner violence or intimacy violence. That's age 11. That's so crazy to me, honestly. I don't think of 11-year-olds experiencing any kind of partner violence. I think of them, not really having real relationships. But I have learned to reframe my thinking a lot about those relationships, because those are very formative years. If you are in relationships where people aren't treating you to their fullest potential and your fullest potential, it can be very damaging later on and lead to relationships that aren't healthy. If you aren't teaching your kids consent now, and if you're not teaching your kids consent here and now, their consent later, their understanding of that later on, it's not going to be there. They're not going to understand that. And consent education is very imperfect. I am not somebody who is an end-all, be-all on that. I struggle daily with consent and understanding it. Mickey gets so frustrated at me because I will just reach over and I'll just take a drink of her drink, and it's like, you could have asked, It's little things like that where you need to just constantly be reminded, oh yeah, okay, consent isn't just sex and in the bedroom. Consent is everywhere. It's in all things, right? That's why I brought about this cooking class. Mm-hmm. Now that I've given you guys some time, do you have any ideas for rejecting or handling rejection gracefully?
I always go back to in the classroom, I am the first to admit my mistakes, and that's just being open, especially if you're teaching this to other kids, or I guess that would be if you're a kid teaching other kids, so I don't know, I was raised it that way. But if you're a parent or someone who has children in your life, we, or at least when I was growing up, I saw my parents perfect and they never made mistakes, right? Which then just led to issues when I was domestically abused in the bedroom, because I believed that I couldn't voice my mistakes and my concerns and my what I thought was right or wrong. And so it starts with, or at least how I've started with my third graders, is just in everything. With, do you want your meat fully cooked through? Even how that seems maybe not to be related. And so with rejection, I would, when I do something wrong in the classroom, or not wrong, but if I make a mistake, let's say I say a word wrong or something like that, instead of being oh my gosh, let's just move on, let's not talk about it, I'm oh yeah, you're right, totally, that's totally my mistake. Moving forward, I did feel a little embarrassed, but that's okay, because now I know in this community where we want everyone to feel loved, we have to talk about that. So modeling, I think, is the best way, and like Liv said, it's we're all learning, right?
So I read a great little quip from Comprehensive Consent, which Mary showed me, and she's really radicalized the way that I view things. And it's consent starts with humility. It's admitting that you don't have all of the answers, and that's hard as humans. We want to be right desperately. I think a lot of people just want to be heard, and they want their opinions to matter. Everybody wants to matter, and you do. But you matter that much more when you understand that you don't know what people are thinking, and you don't know what's going on in their mind, and you don't know their boundaries unless you ask. How do you guys ask for boundaries?
Well, hang on. I'm answering question one.
My spatula, I'm real sad, y'all. This is my brand new spatula I got for Christmas camping. That's okay.
Okay, so I guess I can answer question 1 and 2 in one thing. So my magic word and a new magic word that I'm learning is okay. And especially after rejection or after doing something wrong, or I don't know, just situations where even if you can't name the hurt or the rejection or the embarrassment or the anger, maybe whatever you're feeling in those moments, my new magic word is just to say, and all you have to say is okay. And then you go, oh, okay. And then you don't even have to talk about it more after that. That can be done. You just go, oh, okay. And then, and so I've been working on that a lot with my boyfriend, because sometimes I want to turn things into, oh, he rejected me and now I'm feeling this and now it's this discussion and blah, blah, blah. But, oh, okay, you know? And maybe those feelings are something that I'm going to reflect on in a minute later, but not something I'm reflecting on in that moment. And that's a way that I ask for boundaries, is I'm like, my emotions right now are too wild for me to try and unpackage this here in front of you. So, okay.
I agree. Mary, do you have anything you want to comment on with boundaries, or?
Yeah, I love the growth in the boundary work that I've been doing, and that's at first, like, boundaries are one of the most scary things for me to tackle, because I felt like if I was to reject, I felt like if I set up boundaries, I was going to reject someone, and I knew that feeling of rejection and how much I hated it, and so I just wanted it to be like, no, it's all loving, right? Like, love, love, love. Yes, but to love yourself, you have to set up boundaries. So I think a lot of times boundaries can come with feelings of rejection, but I think of explaining it to a 5-year-old is a great way to talk to adults, because we all have shitty education. So when I think of setting boundaries in a workplace or with my fiance or places like that, I'm going to over-explain, because I want to make sure, even though it's like, I don't really want to be doing this right now, but I know it's an act of self-love. And so I love to explain it and not like talk down to that person, but this is what made me uncomfortable. This is how I'd like to move forward. And I just love to really talk it out, because I think by talking it out is how I feel more secure in those boundaries. And it's never as bad as I could imagine in my head. It's like, if you're coming from a place of loving each other and you're wanting love for yourself, like, the only people that can really argue with that should not be in your life. Like, that's a great sign. Thanks, universe. If someone's coming super negatively, then goodbye. Like, if you can't respect my boundaries, or you're responding to my boundaries as a really negative way, then I don't need you in my life. And so it's been a really great filtration system. It's putting up those boundaries of how I expect people to talk to me, especially like in the workplace. And when someone steps over that, I know, okay, they're not someone who's going to respect my boundaries, so I'm not going to work on that relationship. I don't need to.
Right, and so that's why I brought about cooking too, because like, when you don't like something or when you're allergic to something, you state that and you give reasoning for it. And I understand that sometimes, and especially me, when I set up boundaries, right? When I say like no, I really struggle and I feel horrible. I am a big people pleaser. But sometimes you don't like the cumin going in the food, and you need to state that, and you have to say it. It can be as simple as, don't put the cumin in my food. And you don't need to give any other kind of explanation. You really don't. No is a complete and total sentence all on its own. You can give explanation if you have it, but don't ever let people tell you, well, you did this one time, so you should be wanting to do this again, obviously. That's not how that goes at all. You know, I think about kids and hugs a lot, right? When I see our friend Claire's baby, Aiden, I always ask him, hey, can I give you a hug, right? Instead of just assuming, oh, he sees Aunt Liv, he wants me to give him a hug. I'm like one of his favorite people ever, you know? Because he doesn't necessarily ever remember who I am all of the time. He needs to grow. That's something that I really love seeing through him, because he's told me a couple of times. He's definitely been like, oh, I don't remember you, or oh, I don't know you, and just will cling to mom. And that's okay. I think that as adults, we need to remember so much that children have autonomy and they have this opportunity to choose what they want to do. Alrighty, so I'm flipping these tortillas one last time.
Hugs is fun because we talked about this in our interview, and I mentioned about like the kids in my classroom, and I always draw light, and not in a mean way, but in a way where it's naturally comes up with consent and hugs and personal space and stuff like that. And kids want to make others feel loved. Like, I just believe that. That's why I work with kids, because unconditionally they want to love. But it's so important to teach your kids the same boundaries, like asking for hugs and saying, hey, is it okay if your hair looks super soft? Can I touch it? And if someone says no, it doesn't mean like, no, I hate you, leave me alone. It means, no, my personal space now, I want to love myself and I don't want you to touch me. And that's okay. And it might seem awkward or like weird, but that's only because we were taught terribly. Like, we were taught so bad. So that's why it seems so weird.
And like bridging off of that as well, we just exclude people with disabilities so much. We assume they're non-sexual beings. We assume that because they have sensory overload sometimes, they just don't want any kind of interaction at all. You know, or we had a kid, I remember at a summer camp, had autism, and he was a great kid, but he had a really big issue with wanting to hug kids around their necks, like super duper tight. And so working with him throughout that week on understanding, hey, it's okay to want to give hugs to everybody, but asking first is a really big thing, because we had a different kid in that group who had really big sensory, not issues. I don't know, what is the word I'm looking for? Issues with sensory overload.
Yeah, so
He would just really struggle with sensory overload and really did not like to be touched at all. And Henry, should not use words, but he learned throughout that week, okay, I need to ask, and he understood that other kid didn't like to be hugged, and so he'd ask for elbow bumps, he'd ask for fist bumps, he'd ask for high fives. Teaching your kids when they don't want to give hugs to give other alternatives to people to choose from is also sometimes important. People who, even as adults, hey, what's good, dude? A little cooking practice break. Oh, these tortillas are done. Yum. They look so good. I'll show you guys what your meat should look like.
And it's a feeling thing, honestly, with the Worcestershire sauce and the onion powder and garlic powder.
In my opinion, that's how I was taught.
What's the Italian word? They say enough. You need enough salt, enough pepper.
Exactly.
That's what the recipe calls for.
I'm gonna throw a couple more tortillas on. This is my onion and my cilantro. My tacos are complete. Would you like a taco?
I would like it.
Would you like a taco?
Yes, yeah.
I hope you guys cook some tacos at home, and I hope you guys talk about consent in your cooking. Thank you so much, everybody. All the love and consent is sexy and everything.
It is. Should we share one new thing that we learned, Elle?
Yes. Okay. My one new thing that I learned, besides how to flip a tortilla, is that I want to talk more with my boyfriend about boundaries, and not because we have any issues with boundaries right now, let me be clear, but because I want to make sure that we don't.
Something I learned is the importance of unlearning, and that expressing your boundaries and your needs is the ultimate expression of self-love. And there's absolutely no way that we can love anyone else if we do not internally look at self-love, our boundaries, and that expression of that. And so care for the other humans. No, your boundaries and what maybe relationships you're needing to express more boundaries, because we really can't love each other without loving ourselves first.
Something else I learned is that consent is a constant thing. I don't think I fully understood until doing some research for this workshop how much this is a constant conversation that is never ending. And I'll just leave you guys with a quick tip. You ask, you listen, and then you respect. Thanks, guys.
That's awesome. Lovely. Well, thanks again to the incredible Olivia Rath for this beautiful discussion. Lots of tidbits to take into your life. Share with us things that you implement and how you see it directly shaping and changing the relationships around you, because truly by implementing this is the ultimate act of self-love and community love. And without consent, right, with the absence of consent, there is no positive, right? There just isn't, because people are not being heard, they're not being seen, and that's where we get all of that darkness from the unloved parts, the unheard, and the unseen parts of ourselves. So thank you again, and we will have next week will be our first of this series. Well, it's a second class with Ellie Winter, but we are doing science meets spirituality. So we will dive into how beautiful Mother Nature is and how it only makes our spirit life more grounded and more rooted in that. And it's awesome because we all have different perspectives on spirituality, but the end goal, the commonality is what's most beautiful and what matters.
There we are. All right, we will see you next week. We'll see you on Monday, though.